Welcome and thank you for joining Health Innovations Network mini session. Before we begin, please ensure you have opened the WebEx participant and chat panels by using the associated icons located at the bottom of your screen. Note that all audio connections are muted at this time. If you require technical assistance, please send a chat to the event producer. With that, I'll turn things over to Nurse Jessie. Please go ahead.
Hello and welcome to the 2019 Health Innovations Network mini session, Crushing Mental Health Stigma, Move Past Overwhelm and Analysis Paralysis to Action. I'd like to take a few moments to introduce our speaker today. Mettie is an international keynote speaker, a nationally certified corporate health coach, and the founder of A World Without Suicide. Dubbed the tiny but mighty stigma crusher by her nationwide clients, Mettie is a mental wellness expert and speaker trainer to connect with if your goals include resilient employees, supportive work environments, and compassionate, empowered leaders. Mettie shares her practical leadership process with companies to proactively address and support employee mental health. She's consulted for and trained some of the world's most influential organizations, including NetCom and the Department of Defense. In 2016, the National Alliance on Mental Illness awarded Mettie the Educational Advancement Award for her work to end the stigma associated with mental illness by providing education, raising awareness, and promoting recovery. The impact principles she delivers in her trainings are based upon her 9 years' experience working with leaders to build resilient teams. Welcome, Mettie.
Thank you for having me.
This is going to be a great conversation, and I just thank you for taking time out of your day to have it with us. So before we jump in, I just wanted to frame up our conversation today. I reflected on our Bellin business and community health model where we say we save lives before they know they need saving. And that could not be truer than in our conversation today as we delve into taking action to support the whole person, including the important yet often neglected mental and emotional aspects of being a human. You know, emotional health and mental health underpins chronic disease conditions as well as other major health issues such as substance abuse and suicide. In the latest Will Towers Watson report, we learned that anxiety, depression, substance abuse, and suicide impacts not only individuals, but also the whole organization as morale, job satisfaction, engagement declines, and the cost to insure increases, threatening the sustainability of an organization. So today we acknowledge that we know we need to and we want to take action, and we honor the fact that it can be scary and feel overwhelming. Mettie's here today to demystify and simplify this process and help us in taking action, saving lives before they know they need saving. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mettie. Thank you, Mettie.
Absolutely. That was such a great opening. Thank you so much for framing it that way and for Bellin's commitment to whole person well-being. And that's actually the perfect introduction to how I was planning on opening our discussion today in showing that we are in a very exciting transitional time in the health and safety field, particularly in the last few years where companies are transitioning from that one-dimensional, physical-dominated wellness programs to whole person well-being and taking action in mental health not only as a wellness goal, but as a safety priority. And that's been such a great thing to be a part of. And as you mentioned, Jessie, when we talk about taking steps forward, there are fears and stigmas and questions that come forward. So in our short time together today, I will be going through the 3 steps that we work through with our client partners, our 3-step process: voice, value, vigilance. So I'll give a very brief overview there, and specifically a starting point or a starting step forward that any company or attendee that is joining today can utilize. as well as share an example of what we call corporate champions that are doing a phenomenal job championing and supporting this critical area of health. And I'll tackle one of the fears and stigmas associated with taking that step forward. And then, Jesse, you and I have carved out time for Q&A as well, which will be very exciting. I'm excited to get to that. So with that, I will get to our first step, which is about creating a culture of voice, where we break the silence and stigma surrounding talking about mental health in the workplace. So, Jesse, as you know, we've had many conversations about this offline, that the fear and stigma that comes forward when we start to even think about talking about mental health in the workplace, that we often hear from HR teams is, well, you know, that's a legal liability, it's a can of worms, we don't want to open up. Jesse, I know you have heard that as well. And the truth is there are considerations that we need to think about and best practices when we talk about employee physical health and disability, just like mental health and disability. So it's not exclusive to mental health. And even more on that, the conversations surrounding mental health are taking place in organizations, regardless if you know it or not. And I wanted to share a specific example with you. These are direct quotes taken from emails that we received last month in April from corporations reaching out, so 3 separate, facing discriminative claims and one facing a lawsuit because when these employees went to their direct reports, they received these types of responses from leaders. And by not educating and raising awareness of how to respond, that is putting companies at risk. Jesse, have you noticed this as well?
Yeah, absolutely, Mettie. And I think, you know, there's probably different professions that range in this, I guess, severity. But I think you hit on a really good point here. Just because we fear talking about it doesn't mean it's not being said. And when left unchecked, you know, one of our culture team experts, Lee Bushy, says you get the culture that you ultimately tolerate. So it is important. I think what you're doing is really important because you're flushing out kind of some of the the not said or even, like you point out, said sentiments to replace them with knowledge, and knowledge can be power.
That is so true and so well said. And to that point, the strategy or step forward for creating that culture of voice is to host not only an awareness event, but an education event as well that shares best practices of how to respond in these types of conversations so we can be proactive in that knowledge. And for practical examples, these are just 4 opportunities that our client partners have utilized to help break that silence and share that education. The stigma-free pledge that's mentioned here, that will be sent out separately to everybody that has joined today so they can feel free to utilize that in their organization. And I apologize, I have a call apparently dinging in, so if you hear that beep, that's exactly what that is.
No, this is great, Mettie, and I think one of the things that I continually, in my own personal world, but also professional, I continually voice is that, you know, really normalizing. I love that you're like stigma crushing. It's like normalizing the importance, and I'll call it emotional and mental wellness or well-being or health, because to some extent, you know, we're all experiencing in different ranges or values some form at some point of illness in those realms. And it can range from, you know, being aware of burnout, even in our own lives. I mean, increased cynicism, things like decreased empathy. Those are all, you know, signs and symptoms. And the sooner we can all say, you know what, I've been there. I have it. I can, we all have some form of this, and it's an important component of our overall. The more we can really break the silence on this and say it's not, it's not just your problem. It's all of our collective human experiences.
That is so true, and we have found that. Well, actually, I'll share now a corporation that has really made significant progress, specifically in the last few years, at not just talking about health and the importance of culture, but reinforcing it in several ways. These bullet points are just a few examples of the initiatives and awareness and education that they've built. And the reason why I starred these two is it directly relates to my next slide, which will share the ROI and VOI that they have experienced since having an open conversation and really training their leaders to have the skills, Jesse, that you just talked about. And why I find these statistics and their responses so intriguing is that oftentimes I hear from wellness teams is, well, Mettie, if we talk about mental health in our workplace, we'll have employees claim that they have conditions, they'll call in for mental health days, our absenteeism will go up, where our client partners and Humana is a great also example, would they actually see absenteeism go down? And these are just a few of their specific responses that they've seen.
Wow. So, and truly, this is a local organization, so I love that you featured them. But in truly, talking about it will actually improve some of the things that we're actually fearful of happening. So that's amazing.
Yes, they have just been a great example in showing the power of this awareness and support. So I'll transition to value, which a part of this value step that we work on is valuing mental health equal to physical health. Now, the fear or stigma that we hear about quite often from top leadership is, well, you can't measure mental health ROI. And that's just simply not true. These are just a few metrics that we measure with our client partners. However, this is by no means an all-inclusive list. So there are many others. And if your leadership is in need of seeing the dollars and cents, we have some client results on our website. Workplacementalhealth.org also has some great ROI metrics and case studies on there as well.
And that's definitely important, Mettie. I think, a lot of times you have to go look for this information, but keeping an eye on it is part of our strategic planning, and including, the methods that you listed in those prior slides as interventions and watching these will be really important in strategy planning for any organization.
I completely agree with you, and building in particularly the mental health initiatives into the policies and the procedures and the strategic planning can be very powerful, as you mentioned. And actually, to that point, a strategy or step forward with this step would be working towards a 1-to-1 ratio of equalizing not only initiatives in your programming in terms of wellness and safety, but also in your treatment of mental health and physical health in the workplace. For a concrete example of what this can look like in a workplace, and Jesse, I know offline we talked about championing for Wisconsin headquartered organizations, so I'll share with you one of our client partners that we've worked with very hands-on both in 2018 and still here in 2019, and that's Kohler. Who are, of course, a global organization but are headquartered here in Wisconsin. And they are a great corporate champion that has shown to truly value every aspect of employee health equally. And these are just a few ways that they equalize that treatment. So as an example, of course, they have response plans for things like fires or tornadoes, OSHA, all of those regulation crisis response. But we also work together to create mental health crisis response action plans and action plans for what to do in a suicidal crisis situation that is enacted and shared with all of their locations globally. So that one-to-one, or whether if it's a physical walk challenge, they have the I Will Listen walk that they're actually doing this week. So there's many examples that I can share with their organization, but these are just a few.
Wow, that is actually, I really value this data here because, the crisis response is a really big thing. I can personally say that, in my tenure, I've been here about 8 years and working on-site at different companies. We've had to do several interventions while on-site as a nurse to save somebody's life from suicide. So it is a really big thing. I don't know if I necessarily emphasize that enough with our employers that it's happening. But having the crisis response plan, again, planning for it, takes that overwhelm or scary feeling out of it. Just practicing what we can do to help save a life, that's huge. And that's very empowering, I think, to everybody that works within that organization as well.
I couldn't agree with you more, and it's becoming more and more important and needed in today's workforce. So, and I'm happy to share some articles on those statistics if that would be helpful as well. Our last step that I'll overview here in our time together, because I want to save time for question and answer, is support vigilance. So to your point, Jesse, being able to identify and confidently respond to an employee who's in mental health or suicidal-related crisis. Now, the fear that comes up here that I'll often hear when I first begin working with management teams is, well, Mettie, if my employee has an issue, they really should be calling EAP. I'm not qualified to help them. And an analogy that I use in my manager trainings is if our goal is to equalize our treatment of mental health and physical health, consider you're in the break room and you notice an employee who was eating their lunch and they begin to grab at their throat. You can see they're turning purple, they're not getting air. Would your first initial reaction be, am I qualified to help that person out? No, right? I mean, you would do anything you could, whether it's the Heimlich or call 911 for help. And that same bold, compassionate action should happen in mental health-related crisis. So to that point, the strategy here and where I encourage groups to start, if they haven't started to really address and educate around mental health from a health and safety perspective, is to train managers to know how to support employee mental health and safely respond in crisis. Not only to support that employee, but Jesse, as you know, particularly if, for example, there's a weapon or dangerous machinery on site, this type of situation can escalate very quickly. So knowing specifically how to de-escalate and respond can absolutely save lives of multiple employees.
Wow, that's so powerful. I felt that, Mettie, when you gave that example in a big, big way. So thank you for tying those two together and really, I think just what I said in the intro, demystifying this and sharing these tools with us. It's truly powerful.
Absolutely. And just as many, I shared positive headlines in the beginning, obviously, to show the great steps forward that we're making. But, Jesse, you and I have seen the same reports and the headlines that have really, several have broken out in the last few months of companies that weren't prepared and the tragedies that have followed. So, you and I are on the same page of being prepared so we can change that conversation and we can turn that would-be tragedy into a triumph for that individual. There are I'm not, for sake of time, going to talk about specific training options here. And Jesse, I know that you'll be sending out information following the training. Ours, if you want information, is Leading Resilient Teams, How to Support Employee Mental Health and Safety. You'll be sharing connections options as well. But regardless of the training direction that you go in, these are just 4 qualifiers that we really encourage groups to keep in mind when they're choosing their training program or whether they're building that internally. And I think it's important that we tailor it and customize it to the unique need of not only that industry, but that company culture as well as get hands-on and engaged in the topic. So something to just consider here.
Yeah, I think if you go back to that, just a little heads up, and those are in the parentheses there that Mettie has the QPR mental health first aid. So they're both life-saving techniques and trainings that, as she said, I would be sending out as next step resources that's offered through a community organization right here, or also more information about what Mettie can do to help support your team in all of these different areas. So I just wanted to quick point out those acronyms there.
Yes, thank you for doing that. The last corporate champion I'll share for a practical example before we open it up for Q&A, Jesse, is another global manufacturing company that's headquartered here in Wisconsin, Mercury Marine. And Mercury was very vigilant in responding and reaching out after they had lost a beloved employee to suicide. And as you mentioned in the intro, Jesse, when that happens, it's not an individual issue or even a team issue. The organization is impacted, and the customers that person was working with. I mean, there's an intense ripple effect in those situations. So to respond to that and to be vigilant moving forward, they contacted us and brought in our Leading Resilient Team Manager training. Now, they opened this up as a completely voluntary option for any manager that wanted to be educated in this topic and in these strategies. There was no incentive, no penalty whatsoever if they didn't attend. And what was so great to see was that they had an 87% voluntary participation rate, which was awesome to see. And as a result of the training, you can see their self-reported follow-up data that was collected completely independently within the Mercury Corporation, independent of our organization. And the reason why I share this is I think it's so powerful to see that even in male-dominated, or for lack of a better word, macho-type industries, workplaces can make a significant difference in removing that stigma of getting any employee comfortable about addressing, identifying, and having that conversation. So really, really exciting to see.
Wow, that is, and I just commend the way they did that too, with not making, it's not mandatory, and look at the great rate that they have in participation and the people that opted in, and then also where they took it to now being comfortable to be able to talk to employees about mental health and to really step out. It's a vulnerable position to be in, but truly they felt prepared to have those conversations. So that's excellent, and congrats to them.
Yes, yeah, really, really great to see. And as you said, it can be awkward, so just arming them with that strategies, and you never know whose life you can save, in that aspect. So, yes, kudos to them and their vigilance. So, Jesse, we did carve out time here for question and answer, so I'll open it up and feel free to ask some of the questions that came forward from the group.
Sure. So we'll start off. One of the questions that came up when the registration participants put in their questions was, how can we help employers to provide impactful resources that employees would use?
Great question. So the key part of that question was that employees will use, right?
Yes.
Right? So that's really the emphasis that we should have there. So, and this is something that we really cover extensively in the value steps. So there's two thoughts that I'll share with you here. One strategy is to supply resources using a variety of modalities to meet employees where they're the most comfortable so they will use it. So as an example, not everyone's comfortable calling a 1-800 number when they want education or support. So offering free resources like the HOPE text line, promoting that next to the EAP number for employees that are more comfortable texting, providing on-demand video resources. That's something that we provide to our client partners with high utilization because it's still confidential, but it's an engaging way where it's a little less vulnerable, for example. So that's one way to do it, to vary those. The second is by having that open conversation and removing the stigma, like you said, Jesse, normalizing, reaching out, will have a significant impact on your utilization numbers. So I know I shared Humana in the voice step, and their EAP utilization, for example, is 20%, which is significantly higher as the 2 to 5 national percent. And it's because they've done such a phenomenal job at removing the stigma and having those proactive conversations.
Yeah, and I guess to add to this point, I mean, to really commend you on the work that you're doing within organizations. I mean, the helpful resources that employees will use. I mean, it's just as in wellness activities, it's one thing to point people in the direction that they can go and take this, but sometimes, and most of the time, you need to feel it. You need to experience it yourself. So I think my challenge to organizations out there is how can you actually make this palpable within an average working day? And I mean, it could be something like using, restroom relaxation or meditative techniques before you have, a meeting, or you start out with that, or, teaching us how to communicate respectfully with one another. I mean, all of these things kind of swim up of, mental health prevention strategies because they impact those emotions, they impact the thoughts that we think. And to really make it palpable, like I love that idea of walk and talk, or the ICU program that empowers us as employees to have those conversations of, hey, you don't seem like yourself, I'm here, I can't fix it for you, but I'm here to listen and I can, connect you with these great services and just be an advocate for you during this time. So that's kind of my 2 cents on that question because it has to be palpable, I feel, in addition to other services.
Oh, I couldn't agree with you more, and those were great examples.
Great. I think, we have only 1 more minute left. We had a few more questions submitted, but I wanted to assure our listeners that Mettie has graciously offered to answer these questions offline for us. So when I send out the recording, I will also send the answers to some of those questions that you had for Mettie, and she's including links as well. And then we'll be sending out resources from Connections for Mental Wellness, a local phenomenal resource that will help you on your journey today. And Mettie, I just really, again, thank you for being here. And I don't know, I don't want to put you on the spot, and it's a little off script, but I also wanted to ask you why a world without suicide? Your story is amazing and heartbreaking, but what you're doing with it for good is very powerful. If you feel comfortable, would you mind saying why this is on your heart, why this is on your mind?
Sure, absolutely. So this is so important to me. I've my whole career been in the health and wellness field, but on a personal level, I've lost 2 brothers to suicide, one when I was 10 years old and one almost 20 years later as an adult. And just looking back now and having that loss and wishing that I had identified and been able to support him, well, both of them, weighs heavily on my heart, and I just feel so passionately about removing the stigma so people like my brothers don't suffer in silence. They reach out and get the support that they need so they can thrive and stay with their family, friends, and organizations.
Thank you, Mettie. I hope I didn't put you on the spot, but when I came to watch your seminar, it was really impactful. Last year I had the privilege of watching Mettie's seminar, and even during the seminar for the Wellness Council of Wisconsin, I had learned that one of my friends from high school, her uncle had passed via suicide during the seminar. So it was just a really powerful reminder that, you know, together we can end the stigma and move past that overwhelming fear to really take action to save lives. So thank you, Mettie, for sharing that.
Absolutely. And for any groups that have really had this on their goal list for a long time or have other questions and want to discuss what your next best step would be, please feel free to reach out. I'd be happy to set up a time to connect with you.
Yes, Mettie, thank you for giving that to our listeners as a next step for that connection. We do appreciate that generosity of you to talk with them. And switching gears, because we like to end with an uplifting message, Mettie, who would play you on a TV sitcom so we can all relate with you just a little bit better?
Oh, that is so funny. So the last few months I've been told a few times that I remind attendees of the marvelous Mrs. Maisel from that Amazon. Yeah, and then I've never seen it, so I started watching it, and she is, I can see that, you know, she's raw and relatable, so that's definitely who I would pick.
Awesome. Mettie, thank you for your time today, and thank you to the listeners live or on the recording. We hope you have a wonderful day. Take care.
Yes, thank you. Bye-bye.
That concludes our conference. Thank you for using AT&T Event Conferencing Enhanced. You may now disconnect.